there's nothing more satisfying for me than being able to see a company start to turn things around and really be a leader in their local market through the work that we're doing together.
So welcome to the podcast today. We have Tony Hines on. Welcome, Tony.
Brad, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Excited to have you. So Tony's co-founder with Becky of Streamline Construction Services. And again, you and I have, I don't want to say partnered, but we've worked together and, part of Builder 20, and now you're off on your own venture. And so it's been amazing to see your journey. So.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. I still remember when you joined the Builder 20 Club, and that was quite a moment. I was actually president of the club at that time, and you were the first new member that joined the group under my tenure. So that was a pretty exciting time. It feels like yesterday.
I know. I was thinking back, and I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, I think it might be 7 actually. And I remember that vividly. You were the president at the time, and I was like, man, he's so young. Like, Tony's so young, and he's like running this whole operation with all these builders. Of course, you've had a successful building company with your parents back in Seattle and done stuff all over the country and even outside the country, which I'm excited to talk about. So again, I was very impressed. I know how your business has moved forward now, and I think our listeners will get a lot of value from, your expertise and, knowledge in the industry.
Yeah, that's absolutely my hope. And just really quick to go back to the Builder 20, something else that happened, I'm sure you remember at that same time. So I ended up being president of the Hammers for 2 years. And in my second year was when we officially went independent and created ACBC. And that was an interesting time, because we were moving away from the protection or the shelter, the umbrella of NAHB. And it was, it was a learning curve to say the least, but I'm really proud of the work that the group has done and continues to do. And so many incredible people that I get to the luxury of calling within my network and friends as well. And that's absolutely been really pivotal to my career so far. And I'm sure you would say the same.
Yeah, it's completely changed my entire career in my company. And I actually want to ask you about this, Tony, because I've never really asked anyone from the group about this. And just to give context for listeners, typically, I know the Hammers is the very first group through NHB, and there's been many more over the years. And so predominantly, most Builder 20s are set up through the National Association of Home Builders. You can register at IBS, KBIS, in Vegas or Orlando. They put you with the group. It's very formatted as far as, what the schedule looks like and the documentation and the NDAs and, how everything's set up. And I know that you and your family and others in our group, Galonis and Stan Cusser, so many were involved in those early on beginnings. But the decision was made, as you mentioned, that being the first group, that you wanted some more autonomy, some more flexibility to kind of operate as you wanted. What was that like? How did that come to be, that decision to break away from NHB?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad. And, I think a little bit of historical context would probably help. So Hammers were club number 1 at NAHB Builder 20. And where that came from is, so I'm a 4th generation builder and developer. And my parents at the time were building in Nebraska. And they were looking for a way to be able to improve their business and network with other builders, but in a non-competitive way. At that time, really the only option was the Custom Builder Symposium. And so they would attend every year. And when attending, they started having conversations with other builders, but as well as with individuals from NAHB, talking about the need for this ability to come together, share ideas, share lessons learned and ways to do business better. And from those conversations was what really sprang the idea of creating the Builder 20 Club. And so the Hammers really did pave the way, and they wrote a lot of the procedures and, if you will, the book on how to conduct 20 club meetings and, the legal structure, everything around it. And there are so many members in the group that were founding members still. And so it's incredible after 30 some years that they're still getting after it, and not only getting after it, but continuing to elevate their business. And so, to answer your question, for a few years, the club had been expressing this, I guess you would say, desire to be able to operate a bit more independently, primarily because, NAHB was very regimented at that point with how they wanted 20 club meetings to be ran. And if you wanted to, say, do a pop-up meeting or a seminar, it would fall outside of their purview. And so there was a couple times where we came together for, let's say, superintendent learning exercises that would fall outside the standard meeting schedule, as well as the ability to benefit from the sponsorship of the group. And so, if you're part of and first of all, I just want to put this out there. The NHB is a fantastic organization. They lobby very well for our industry, and I do think that they add a ton of value. But when you look, when I was there looking in the room of these 20 incredible movers and shakers from throughout the country, there was a lot more potential. And those conversations very quickly went from how do we achieve a bit more autonomy under the umbrella to what would it look like if we did go independent. And there was definitely a few, what you might say, challenging conversations around that, because of course, the legacy protection that NAHB offers is not something to put lightly. And also the added sense of responsibility to every single member of the group about, okay, well, if we do go independent, that means every single person is going to have to step up in a way and do a bit more to make the club function well. And I would say that, it wasn't like this aha moment that we have to go independent. It was more just a steady realization over the course of a couple of years. And it just so happened to fall under my tenure as president. And I was really honored that they were willing to make that move and allow me to help, pave that road. And so, to their credit, every single individual did step up, and they really made an impact with being able to get the organization created and setting up bank accounts and securing sponsors. And what ended up happening was the benefit of that became, more autonomy, the ability to really be intentional with the moves that the club made and benefit from the sponsorships. And so, when you fast forward to today, now the club is very blessed to be able to call a number of outstanding companies within the industry sponsors of ACBC. And yeah, it was just, it was an exciting time. And I really enjoyed watching the club kind of go through this, what I'll call second phase of its growth, going from under the purview of NAHB to moving to an independent operation.
Well, it's been incredible. I mean, thanks to you and your family and so many others who are so instrumental in the Builder 20, which I know we'll get into your venture now, and probably how that's led to that in a way. But like, what's incredible to me is, I mean, you think about most entrepreneurs, right? It's hard to make that jump. It's hard to leave, a comfort of maybe you're working for a great employer, and to go out on your own. There's so much unknown and so many challenges, and even as much as everyone in this group is an entrepreneur and they had their own business, to kind of leave the NHB, as you mentioned, that security in a way to be like, okay, now we have to recruit other builders, as there's turnover, and how do we find them? And, without tapping into NHB, and, social media has helped with that for sure to some extent. Some of the networking events that we have. And I know you've been, you and I met as well at Vegas in the Builder Show. And so, but the whole operation, as you mentioned, that everyone has to really go to the next level to understand the bylaws, live by the bylaws, to hold each other accountable. And I know something that you, Becky, have done very well is hold people accountable. And hence you haven't got very far from me, even though, I know that you've since retired from the group.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I absolutely appreciate you saying that. And I guess, really, to sum it up succinctly, I think when you find yourself with an incredible group of people, you have the opportunity to uh, make moves and be able to set yourself up for success in the future. And I really feel like that's what the group has done. And I couldn't be more proud of what ACBC has accomplished.
Yeah, and what's amazing is, and just a quick history here, because I want to get into some perspective that's unique for you, Tony. Is not only have you done speculative work and build to suit work, lump sum and cost plus and all the above in this greater Seattle area and some tough conditions in Washington working through the pandemic, but you've done development in Turks and Caicos. You've done, you've consulted many construction companies and builder 20s right around the country as and to kind of tee that off, what's interesting is I know that when your company was leaving the Builder 20 because Next Phase of Life, some other ventures that were important for you guys at the time. Becky, your mom was, that was a big loss. We're losing Tony and Becky here, who are such contributors to the group, that we brought you back when I hosted in Scottsdale. So I'm hosting in Scottsdale. It's the financial meeting. And to give, again, reference for those listening is you have 2 meetings a year that are the main ones. And, the spring ones, when you go through financials, it's very in depth. We're sharing everything financially as a company. And then in this, in the fall, it's a little bit different, but your mom came, she audited all of our companies. She held us accountable. And it really turned into, from that meeting alone, to say, hey, is there a role where we could have a program chair and hire you guys back to consult us, even though there's a lot of savvy builders in this group, to have someone to keep you accountable. And I know that's one of the many services that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be fair, the transition to doing more consulting work within the industry, I do want to give a lot of credit to the Builder 20 group. I've said often that my parents and the Builder 20 Club are the most impactful influences on my career. And my mom and my dad both, huge credit to them. And as you said, mom sort of found her way back into that role, and it was a natural fit, and it demonstrated also a need. And when you see a need, you obviously want to see if you can step up to the plate and fill that need. And I think that's where somewhat organically the direction of doing more consulting work has happened. Now, I actually do still do building and development as well, but scaled back. And there's, of course, a few different reasons for that. But, you made mention of the different market segments that I offered product in. So, of course, high-end luxury custom construction, as well as speculative development. Additionally, some commercial work and multifamily development. And all of that, experience that I've gained through my career has allowed me to be in a position, I feel very blessed to be here, where I can start to impart some of that knowledge and information to other individuals who are also striving to be successful in what is a very difficult business. The thing about building and development is it is a extremely difficult industry to be successful in. If you are an entrepreneur and you want an easy path, I would say this probably isn't for you. And there's many reasons for that. You have complex management of projects where you're dealing with tight deadlines, demanding clients, dozens of subcontractors. You have jurisdictional permitting challenges, zoning issues. You're building in the weather, out in the elements. And you also, supply chain management. There's so many aspects that are involved in it. But you couple that with the high risk and liability of what we're doing. We have workers on our job sites every day who are in precarious positions. You are liable for not only their health and safety, but any damage to the property. Also inherent within our industry is volatility related to cash flow. You might have a large project underway and that project wraps up, and then maybe there's a gap until your next project starts. So how do you manage and mitigate those challenges? And to top it all off, skilled labor is becoming less and less common, I would say, in today's world. You have a group of craftsmen who are aging out of the industry, and it's a growing industry, and there's not enough new skilled tradespeople that are coming in. And so you sort of bundle that all together, and you have a real challenging mix, or I guess you'd say problem set, that needs to be solved. And I looked at, just to maybe give a little bit of added detail, when I was just doing building and development, it was fulfilling, but I was also, as I matured and grew, looking for a way to have a greater impact, both on my community, but as well in the industry that I worked in. And so in my community, I started getting more involved in nonprofit work. I've sat on the board of a couple really incredible nonprofits, and that work is both meaningful and impactful, and gave me a lot of satisfaction. And what I then grew to realize was, okay, if I want to have a outsized impact on my industry, it's very hard to do in a local and a specific market and product set. And so what way can I achieve that, additional fulfillment that I'm looking for out of life? And consulting is just a natural progression of that, because we now at Streamline have the pleasure of clients in, I think it's 10 or 11 states across the US. And every single day, we're right in the mix with them, going through the highs and the lows, the difficulties and the successes. And there's nothing more satisfying for me than being able to see a company start to turn things around and really be a leader in their local market through the work that we're doing together.
I think what's amazing is, and again, this is not to discredit, any billing consultants or, business coaches or, construction experts. I know there's a lot out there, and a lot of them have, either I've, learned from, or I've seen them work with some of my peers. I think what's unique about your position, Tony, is you're actively building, even if it may not be at the huge scale it was before, but you're active, and you kind of spoke about this a little bit and touched on it, as labor markets have changed, tariffs right now. I mean, how, there's so many different things, and construction is, although in some ways, we tease each other that we're prehistoric, we're slow to adapt technology. That's changing. We're seeing how AI, I'm using AI every day in my business. I think a lot of builders are. Technology is something we've tried to be at the forefront, from QR codes and other things. Point being is, you are actively, daily breathing this industry, at the same time consulting. And I think that's unique, because not everyone is that, I don't want to say engaged, but you completely are, like a better word, up to speed of what's happening currently. How has that played a role in just the efficiency of, the mentorship and guidance that you're giving other builders?
Absolutely. Well, I would say in general, my experience and knowledge of the industry plays an extremely important role. To your point, there are some incredible companies and individuals who are also offering consulting and business coaching services. And this is no comment on what they're doing. It's more so just the philosophy that Mom and I firmly believe in, and what we try to bring to the table. And that's that there really isn't a one size fits all solution and approach for what we do. And so having the background of working in these different market segments, developing different product, I'll even add the fact that I own and manage a handful of commercial properties, as well as 33 residential units, a vacation rental property. And I think all of that sort of lends to my ability to bring useful and impactful information and advice to the table with the clients that I work with. And so being able to take not only my day-to-day experience, but just my historic experience, and aggregate that all definitely makes a difference. And I'll also add, to that idea of a one size fits all approach is that there are some great educational courses out there for builders and remodelers, developers, et cetera. But typically those educational courses are from more of a high level view, and they offer solutions that certainly there's some industry best practices in there. But as you know, the nature of each construction company is so unique that applying a sort of a broad or a macro approach to how to improve your business might not always work out the best. And so something that we really feel strongly about is that the clients that we work with and engage with, we want to know and understand their business as good or better than they do. And so, a large component of the early work that we do together with any of our clients is just getting to know them, getting to know how they conduct their business, what's the structure of their org, what are their systems and procedures currently. And in doing that, what we learn is, number one, where their strengths are, but then number two, where their areas for improvement are. And that it's the latter half of that where we're then going to really focus our efforts. We're going to take and leverage their strengths, but we're really going to work to shore up those areas of improvement. And each company, that can be something different. Some companies have extremely strong human resources. They have incredible project managers or superintendents or carpenters. Some companies have an incredibly powerful subcontractor base. They live in an urban area and they have the ability to bid projects out to 4, 5, 6 subcontractors, which is an extremely useful tool in and of itself. But you can't really be able to dig in and say to someone, here's how I feel that you can improve the financial health of your company or the operational fluidity of what you're doing or just the overall success of your business without first understanding what makes them unique to begin with and what areas we can really dig into and what might be the low-hanging fruit that we can identify early on and say, with a few minor adjustments here or the implementation of a particular system there, you can really see a noticeable effect. And it becomes apparent when you start, looking at KPIs, key performance indicators, and you say, all right, what is your gross margin on a typical project? What net profit are you running? Sometimes just asking those questions leads to a realization that that's where the work needs to take place. Like, what our peers do is so difficult that often they will really get tunnel vision on what they do well, and someone, whether through just a lack of information or an inability to maybe zoom out a bit, they will miss these other aspects of running a successful construction company that becomes really apparent when you step in as a third party, as an outside perspective, and say, look, the sole reason I'm here, the entire measure of my success is making your business better, more profitable, and stand out amongst your local peers.
I love that. And you touched on this a little bit, Tony. I think what's unique in being open for the audience, not only have you and Becky collaborated with me through the Builder 20, I think we're at 2 years now that I've worked with you and Becky on consulting individually for my business. I don't think any of us ever know everything. We don't have enough experience, to see around every corner. And what's unique about your strategy is not only from a day-to-day, you mentioned the KPIs, which is probably where I'm involved, but I know from my Builder 20, when they came out and did analysis of our firm, one of their big recommendations was put together a leadership team. And with that leadership team, that's something where Becky spent a lot of time outside of me. I'm not on the call. She's meeting with Spencer and Megan, members of my leadership team individually. And it could be personal things, it could be business things, and really about their role. And really, I think what's unique about how you structured it, and again, this goes back to your experience, Tony, is that you can look at my org chart, you can go through and you can understand the different roles and, how that scope of work plays a part in their success and then building around that. And I think it's really unique because there's so many different aspects of value that you've brought to our firm, that things I would have never thought about had we not hired you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and something I think is important to recognize too, Brad, is that companies of all different sizes need that help and that added perspective. And it can be. I have clients who it's a husband and wife team, and that's the company. And I have clients who have, like you said, an actual org chart with dozens of employees and lots of moving pieces. And the reality is that you you have maybe different problem sets, but ultimately the mindset that you bring to the table, I think, ends up being consistent across the board. And that mindset really is just coming in with the goal and the endeavor of having an impact on the companies and the people that you work with. And so in your case, for example, you guys are fantastic at what you do. The product that you build is incredible. You're consistently competing at the top end of the market, and in many ways leading the charge of innovation within the construction business. And that's very exciting. And ultimately, though, as I'm sure you would acknowledge, there's still some real fundamental basics that have to be addressed within the company. And so you made mention of working with your leadership team. That's something that we do with a lot of our clients. Is we'll work, have one-on-ones with the estimator or the lead PM or the superintendents, and essentially try to bring the entire company along the journey of improvement. And as you well know, time is our most valuable resource. And so, for instance, in your circumstances, you're getting pulled a million different directions 24/7. And just having the bandwidth to be able to do everything that's necessary to keep your company performing, firing on all cylinders, it's honestly not always humanly possible. And so being able to bring someone in who knows and understands your company as well as the construction business as a whole can be invaluable, from the sense of being able to get that time and that quality exchange of information, not just with you as the leader of the company, but as with other key individuals in your company as well, and really working to, I guess you would say, it's how would I put this? When you're involved in any, I love sports analogies. If you've ever been involved in any team endeavor, you'll realize that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so the fact is that the time and the work need to be put in to every level of the organization to be able to ensure that the org as a whole is moving forward in lockstep. And we get a ton of satisfaction out of being able to see that performance incrementally across the board, and not just purely from the top of the company.
I love that. And, the reality is, as you mentioned, and I think that's a unique perspective because at least my experience has been, a lot of, consulting firms are working with the owner, as you mentioned. It's one-on-one. You're looking at KPIs. You kind of look at the big picture, and seldom do you get the voice of other key people in the organization and how that plays a role. And it's amazing how beneficial that is, whether you're looking at retention, whether you're looking at company culture and efficiencies. I mean, to your point, the owner of the company, no matter size, you're only seeing from your goggles, from your vision. And there could be experiences and feelings that others have that might be a good perspective. And as long as you have, call it the willingness to, take that criticism or recommendation, sky's the limit of how, your company can succeed from that, that advice that comes in.
Right. And just as an example of this, so one of my clients that I'm working with right now, they recently onboarded a estimator. It's a new position for them. They're growing their company and they didn't have the ability to keep up with getting those cost controls and budgets put together for every project that's coming across their desk. And so it made sense that there was this role that was identified as having a significant impact within the company. And so they went out and we worked together to find a good fit for them with their estimator. And in that work, we actually found another area of the business that needed to be shored up that hadn't previously been identified. And that was a more detailed set of construction specifications. So up to that point, they had been primarily working off blueprints, design documents, and then sort of a bullet point list of notes that were comprising their construction specifications. And it very quickly became apparent, okay, now that you have a key team member who's in this role and their entire job is to ensure that the budget is accurate, that the bids are correct, and that the job is structured and set up for success, that for that individual to perform at the highest level, they needed a detailed set of construction specifications to be able to work off of. And so you never know when you're working wherever it is with whatever individual position that they hold within the company, what area of opportunity you might see to say, hey, this is something that I think will significantly impact your ability to operate your business in a better, smoother, more productive fashion.
It's amazing. And let's touch on this. One thing, Tony, you mentioned that you've built spec, you've built build a suit, you've worked internationally. I mean, it's very complicated. For that reason, you've consulted with companies in 9 or 10 different states. How has that experience played a role personally for you, building in the Caribbean, building, with the different language barriers, shipping, freight, taxes, labor pool. I mean, it's hard enough to build, here in the States, yet alone. And again, Washington, California, probably not the most pro small business states, right? To make things easy. How has that played a role just in, your experience to date?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, to address the last part first, Washington State is absolutely a difficult state to build in, from regulation to compliance. We routinely see permitting timelines of 6 to 9 months. I've had a project that was in permitting over a year before. And so dealing with the challenging jurisdictions, you would think that the civil servants, their goal is to help facilitate economic growth and development. When in reality, you go into those offices and it almost seems like they're trying to throw up roadblocks in your way. And on the one hand, I do understand and respect their perspective to a degree, because they want to ensure that what is built to a high standard and you have life safety considered in everything that you're doing, that you're not having a negative or outsized negative impact on the environment. A project that I just finished up recently, 3,300 square foot custom home. It was on wetlands. It also had a significant stream buffer in addition to 15% slopes. So that put it into critical slopes in with respect to our jurisdiction. And having to learn how to navigate all of that and still find a way to be successful absolutely has been foundational in my understanding and comprehension of what other individuals are going through. And additionally, as you mentioned, my experience of building out of the country has only added to that. You think that we have challenges when it comes to permitting or supply chain management or subcontractor communication and accountability. But you go to another country where there is additional language barriers in play, where the jurisdiction may not be as regimented. And sometimes it's as much about who you end up interacting with as it is how you interact with that individual. All of that lends to my appreciation for what people within our industry encounter every single day, and it helps me to recognize that whether I'm dealing with a client in California or New Mexico or Massachusetts or anywhere in between, that they likely have their own unique problem set that they're working through. And so, having navigated that myself, I can bring the questions to bear that hopefully generate useful information. I might not know exactly how hard it is to permit a home in a township in Massachusetts, but I know what questions to ask. And I know from asking those questions what barriers may be able to be hurdled easier, or finding ways to maneuver throughout that process more fluidly, because I have had the luxury of being able to operate in several markets, both within the U.S. as well as outside.
It's amazing as you look back, having worked through, you know, the bureaucracy side, if you will, of getting permits and building there in Washington. What were some of the biggest challenges you had, especially when you were full fledged, building as opposed to a little bit of both now? What were some of the toughest challenges that you can remember, just going vertical?
Absolutely. I mean, anything along the shoreline is incredibly challenging. Anything that has conservation involved in it. So whether you're talking about wetlands or stream setbacks, it could be, especially if that stream has salmon spawning in it. It's like you don't always know what you're going to encounter. And I would say the most challenging was a family compound that we constructed on Lake Sammamish. And that was a project where we did work. So we were brought in, an architect led that project. And the architect had been working with the client for a few years just in the planning phase of it. And the architect brought us in at a relatively early stage of the planning, because he recognized that having the input of the individual that would be taking it vertical was going to be critical to having this project go from conceptual to realized. And that process, that project for us was a 5-year project from the time that we first started having meetings and discussions with the client and the architect to being able to wrap up the punch list and move into the warranty phase of the project. And so it was about 2 years of planning and permitting. And what is especially, I guess you would say, wild about it is that even once we supposedly had our approvals, we then began the work on site, and the inspector would come on site and identify something that the person behind the planning desk had missed. And that would bring the project to a halt until we address those concerns as well. And it certainly made for some challenging discussions with the architect and the client, as well as the maintaining the motivation and energy within our team. I mean, you think about the 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, and what I just call life force that gets invested into something that you want to see brought to life. And at a certain point in time, when you're in the middle of it, you can't even see that light at the end of the tunnel. And I will, though, say, Brad, that it's in those moments and those experiences where I've grown the most. If you were to ask me what have been my greatest learning experiences outside of the upbringing from my parents or what I've learned in the Builder 20 Club, it would absolutely be the difficult projects, the difficult clients that I've dealt with along the way. And if you'll allow me, I actually have an anecdote for what I consider to be a pretty pivotal moment in my career. And that was a 5,500 square foot new custom home in Seattle. And the client, so it was for a family, but I primarily dealt with the husband, and he was my point of contact. Everything went through him. Great guy. Still enjoy being able to catch up with him. But in the midst of the build, what I learned was it seemed like he sort of enjoyed or gamified trying to find a way to get inclusions or upgrades or finding what you might call holes or gaps in my documentation or my contract, right? And it was to the point where I would get an email from him and I would start to wonder, okay, how much money am I losing today? Because I can't quite be sure where he's going to try to poke holes in our specifications or the work that's taking place on site. And my superintendent on that project, he definitely achieved a point where you would call, he was feeling the burnout and the pressure was on. And I had a number of conversations with him where we just had to sit down and talk about, look, is this more difficult than our average project? Absolutely. Is this fun every day to wake up and be nervous about what we might get called to judgment on? Not one bit. But if we can maintain a positive and forward-thinking mindset and simply go into every one of these client meetings or discussions with integrity and be willing to, I think this is also a really key point, Brad, be willing to admit when you have made a mistake. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that'll dig a hole deeper for you than making a mistake and then doubling and tripling down on it, right? And so from that experience, I came out the other side of it almost, as you might say, forged by the fire, and recognizing, all right, there are some areas both within my contract, my construction specifications, and even how I handle my client management that need to be shored up and need to be improved. And I have two choices. I can either come away with it with a sour taste and potentially encounter this problem set again, or I can make the improvements that are necessary and set both myself, my company, and my team up for success the next time we encounter a situation like this.
I think the mistake angle is really interesting and very thought-provoking in this way, Tony, is, again, I consider myself, I think many of us probably prideful in a way, right? So, you don't want to admit to a mistake, and maybe you don't want to admit because you think that, or at least in my opinion, where it's like, hey, they may think we're not qualified, or that there's issues, that if I'm admitting to this, what other mistakes are out there? And there's no question that there may some clients that may take that angle, but in reality, I look at it when I've had trade partners that come and are just pointing the finger and blaming everyone else, as opposed to those that have come in and said, look, Brad, I effed up, I messed up, like we missed this. And then it's more of like, okay, how do we figure this out together? I look at how others have approached me and how that's changed my understanding. And I think in general, most people, will have that understanding. Maybe not all clients, but I think most of them would.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think even if the client doesn't respond in the way that you might like, I still fall back on conducting myself with high integrity, wanting to make sure that my business ethics are, hopefully leading amongst my peer group. And, I learned that lesson. It wasn't actually in the building industry. It was just in life, so we all, we have family members, we have people who we interact with on a daily basis, who we care about. And the quickest way to lose respect is to not take ownership of your actions. And so in my mind, it's as simple as, this is the way that I can put my head on the pillow at night and be able to rest easy, is knowing that I conducted myself with a high level of integrity. And I feel it's a natural progression of that to bring the same idea to the business. And so absolutely, have I made mistakes along the way? 100%. But how you handle those mistakes, to your point, and I think every builder out there can relate to this. If you have a subcontractor who screwed something up, the last thing that you want to hear from them is that it was the electrician's fault, or it was it was the framer's fault. What you want to hear is, here's what happened. This is something that I wanted to bring to your attention, and then work together to create a solution to move forward, because we live in an imperfect world. And the only way that we can continue to operate within that imperfect world is to accept that along the way, those imperfections will rear their ugly head. But at the same time, we can limit what could go wrong from all things possible. We can really narrow that window by owning our mistakes and working to implement solutions, not just in the immediate, in the present, but that will also be applicable down the road. And so, to loop this back into the work that we do on the consulting side of things, that's the same type of discussion that I'll have with my clients on a regular basis is, there might be pieces of this that we couldn't control. And I'm not saying this is 100% your fault, but if 80% of it can be chalked up to factors within your control, that's 80% improvement we can strive for on the next go around. And I think that, again, bringing it back to how difficult it is to operate in the construction and development business, that is absolutely critical if you want to have longevity and you want to have a reputation that you're proud of.
What do you think, from your side, and there's two parts to this question, Tony, the why. Maybe the why on a personal level, of how that's evolved over the years, and then also maybe from a business aspect to why you started Streamline Construction Services.
Yeah. So first of all, my why, hands down, is my family. I am blessed to have an incredible partner and wife, as well as 5 beautiful children. And every single day when I get up and I see their faces, that is my why. It's what pushes me to want to excel and to be better. Now, do I get better every single day? No, there's absolutely days where I might take a step backwards, but the mentality of 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, I'm okay with. I accept that because I'm human. We all are. And, it took me a while. Early on in my career, I was absolutely more ego driven. I wanted to build the biggest houses, the best houses. I wanted the highest annual volume possible. I wanted to build in all the prestigious neighborhoods. I wanted the celebrity clients, and there's nothing wrong with having those goals. But when that is the only thing driving you, in my experience, it ultimately leaves you feeling dissatisfied, because I would have these accomplishments, and I would then sit back and not have the feeling of satisfaction that I thought that I would. I wouldn't have that moment of, all right, I've officially made it, right? And so as my family grew and as I recognized what was important in life, that allowed me a different perspective, which is absolutely still go out and work to have an impact in everything that you do, work to be a leader, work to be successful, but do it because you want to set an example for the people that you love. And with that will come the dream projects, the ability to work for people that you only imagined was possible at the beginning of your career. And that ultimately leads to, I'm sure you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy. So you get to that period of self-actualization. And I would say that's really what moves an individual towards that phase of self-actualization, is recognizing that it's not all about what feathers are in your cap, but it's actually also about how you got there, how you conducted yourself along the way, and how you want to leave people feeling after you've interacted with them. So that's absolutely my why. Coupled with that, of course, is my faith. God is my guiding light. And there's so many times where I have felt lost and alone and scared and not sure how to move forward. And I always went back to prayer was the way to get through that. And so it, in the most difficult moments in life, I think it's important to recognize the value of the people around you and what it is that you might ascribe any higher belief to, and really hold on to that because you don't have anything else.
It's so true. I mean, if you don't have a why, as you mentioned, it's really hard. I mean, let's just be honest. Construction, we must be a glutton for punishment. It's probably the hardest profession for us to choose, Tony.
Yep.
So dealing with the day, construction, and it's a grind. And to that point, a step further, I think mental health. You're an entrepreneur. You're on an island so much, and you may have interaction with other builders, but it can be lonely just not having a resource there. And if you don't have either camaraderie and other mentors in the industry, and you don't have a why, I mean, there's a lot of things that in a way work against us.
Absolutely. And I think also, if you were just to ask me, what would set someone up for success in the industry, I would say it's a combination of humility, determination, and a recognition that it does take a team to accomplish the high level and complexity or high level of challenge and complexity of the projects that are put in front of us every single day. And if you can't approach that with that mixture of humility and determination, then I do feel that you're going to have a point in time where you say, why the heck am I doing this? What am I here for? Is this worth it? And I think it's okay to ask those questions, but you don't want them to cripple you. You don't want them to prevent you from continuing to operate and function at a high level. And I do think that's what separates those who will have long-term success and those who won't.
So what do you do for fun?
Family time, number one. I absolutely love to spend time with my wife and children. Being able to, and I think this goes back to my comment earlier about being primarily ego-driven in the early part of my career, is sometimes I would come home and I would be frustrated or I would be upset, and not intentionally, but I would end up passing along that energy to the people who were closest to me. And that was something that I really had to struggle with as an individual, was how can I continue to strive to take on these challenges, to climb the mountain, but also keep what's important in life at the highest level of focus. And going through that and recognizing that I needed to spend more time with my family and I needed to prioritize what was truly important for me, allows me to not only have fun, but to be at peace in my day-to-day. I also love to be active. I mean, working out, staying healthy is something that I think can't be overstated, the value of it. Whether that's, first of all, you have to eat right, and we could get into that whole, like when you go to the grocery store, shop the perimeter, right? Yeah. Or the days that you definitely don't want to get in the gym, or you don't want to go to the track, or you don't want to get that workout in. Those are the days you have to make it happen. And then finally, just, having a good core group of people that I am lucky enough to be able to call friends, who I can, let off steam with and be able to just enjoy living and being in the moment. And so, it's nothing too exciting. I mean, go to the mountain, snowboard, whatever it might be. But ultimately, it really, for me, it's about being present in those moments and with the people around me, more so than it is any particular activity that we might be embarking on.
It's incredible. I mean, Tony, you've been amazing. I know. I want you to have it. I want you to be able to give a plug here and let the listeners know where they can find you, where they can contact you. From my perspective, I highly recommend my business. Again, so beneficial from the Builder 20, the Coalition Summit, all these different avenues I've been part of. Such a great community here. Designers, architects, the podcast. I mean, so many people have played a role in our company, but on a personal level, for 2 years, consulting with you and Becky has made just a monumental difference in the day-to-day.
Well, that's really amazing to hear, and honestly, that is a massive part of the motivation of why we do what we do, and so that feedback is greatly appreciated. In terms of just talking about the business a little bit more, if you're interested in finding out if we might be able to bring value, if we can offer that ROI that you're looking for, feel free to look us up. We're on Instagram at Streamline_CS. We do have a website, but it's currently under construction. That's in the bio of our Instagram as well. And ultimately, even if Streamline might not be the right fit for you, I just would say this is a call to action for all of your listeners and anybody who works within the construction business to take a moment and try to regain that perspective on what it is that you can do to make your business function more optimally from a financially healthy perspective, and continue to put in that work every single day, because it's not going to get easier. No one is going to care more than you care. That's something I can't hammer home enough. And beyond that, Brad, I just want to say thank you for being willing to have me on and have this conversation. I greatly admire and look up to what you do and the work that you're endeavoring on every single day. The projects that you and your team are putting together are nothing short of incredible. And I think you are a fantastic example of what other people can look to and say, that's possible. It's doable. I simply need to have that right mix of humility, determination, and motivation. And I can get there as well.
Well, you've been incredible. Tony, thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. I really appreciate it.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.